Okay, welcome, Congresswoman Esty.
Thank you. Great to be here. Enthusiastically running for re-election. So, and I'm doing that because I've found, despite what one reads and what I also see in Washington too often, I found I've been able to get good things done. And that's both on the constituent services side for individuals in the district. We actually are over $9.9 million that my staff and I have been able to secure in earned benefits back for individuals. So that's people who contact the office for Social Security disability benefits that they're having trouble getting, or VA benefits, or Medicare, or IRS refunds. That doesn't include things like visas to return, to come to the United States to go to a family wedding or a funeral. It doesn't include helping people with applications for 501c3 status. It doesn't count many other things that we help with, grant proposals that we help groups or towns write. And that doesn't include any grants. That's just for individuals. That's meaningful difference in people's lives. Veterans, a World War II veteran who never received medals because they came home, they wanted to get back to their family, they didn't think about it, and now their grandchildren are asking, Grandpa, what did you do in the war? It's very meaningful for them now to have a chance to really talk about this formative time in their lives. So that is important, and it's important because I really see my mission, and Connor's been on my team for about a year and a half now or so.
Well, almost, yeah, about a year. Closer to a year, yeah.
I really view our mission as one of restoring faith in democracy in this really difficult time. And there are a couple of ways to do that. And one is actually by being available to and engaged in conversation with people about what can we do better, what's not working, what could work better. And it's also about being effective. Despite the challenges in Congress, I've been able to get bipartisan support for a lot of pieces of legislation, 4 of which have been signed by the President and are hanging on my wall. Those are bills. In addition to those bills, I had 6 major amendments in the highway bill and was part of writing the first long-term bill we've had in a number of years. That secured $3.6 billion over the next 5 years for Connecticut for much-needed transportation projects. We know that's unbelievably important to people in their daily lives, and it is a major factor for the business community. It's actually part of the reason that influenced Jeff Immelt to go up to Boston was ease of transportation in and out of Boston, compared with challenges in our state. I hear it a lot from companies. We got an extra $310 million. Having a long-term bill actually allowed the I-84 project around Waterbury, something Luther and I are very familiar with. That project is 10 months ahead of schedule and is using local labor and local family construction companies. So it's feeding families right now. That project is going faster because we had a long-term bill. They were able to put it out to bid more efficiently, and it's actually going to get done currently ahead of schedule and under budget. And that's what happens when actually government functions well. We are able to get a pollinator amendment in. You would say, what are we talking about bees in the highway bill? I've met with some of the pollinators in the district, with Dan Hannon, does Hannon's honey, and is actually one of the big pollinators. Incredibly important for, say, the apple orchards, of which I have some in my district, but there are tons. For example, if you think about Lyman and elsewhere in the state, we've had a huge die-off of bees. It's a national problem and concern. I do a lot of environmental work, although I'm not on those direct committees. Well, by getting educated more about the challenges that pollinators have, I worked across the aisle with colleagues from California to do an amendment that has the U.S. Department of Transportation manage the rights of way on the millions of miles of U.S. highways in a way that will use native species and maintain native species of plants that are friendly to pollinators for that region. And so that means things like leaving the milkweed, let it grow. Milkweed is actually a really good thing for butterflies and for bees. Well, as you know, they probably go through, they cut everything down, to stubble. And this actually says, no, actually let more of it grow. And that actually provides corridors that are important for maintenance of pollination. Now, these never make headlines. Granted, this is not, I'm not going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for this sort of legislation. But this is important to this state and this country, that we take sensible steps to actually use government, use regulations in ways that advance the interests of the American people. Our health, our food security and safety. And I got through a dairy amendment that the dairy farmers of Connecticut have been trying for 20 years to get an amendment passed, and it required, this is literally, when companies, and I'm sure Luther, you hear it because you talk with folks in the business community, man, it's going to take an act of Congress to get this fixed. This was actually an example. It took an act of Congress to change a provision on milk trucks and the weight of milk trucks in the state of Connecticut. We had different rules than our surrounding states, and it meant that dairy trucks would have to dump milk at the border or leave, cross out of the state with tanks that are not filled. Well, if you think about a Coke bottle, or actually take this, when you shake it, if it's full, it doesn't move that much. But if it's partly empty, it moves a lot. In the northwest corner, in the northeast corner, where our dairy farmers are, it's actually less safe to have these semi-filled trucks, because they go around the corners, it sloshes, and it can make them flip. So it's actually expensive for them, because they've got to use 5 trucks rather than 4, because they're not allowed to use heavier trucks. This is really important for these dairy farmers who are barely managing to keep their businesses going, 3rd, 4th, 5th generation families that really want to maintain this tradition. It's important for food security and food access in New England. It's important as part of our land maintenance policies, actually, frankly, to keep family farms going. And that's where our transportation policy actually affects our land use policies in that area. That's something that they had to convince me this made sense, that it was safer, and then once they convinced me and I really understood, okay, actually it's safer to do it this way, as well as better for your business. I was able to find a Republican in upstate New York, Rich Hanna, and I used my early morning workouts with Paul Ryan at 6 a.m. to remind him he's from a dairy state, and I'd appreciate his help with the amendment. And I made the ultimate sacrifice. I've now figured out the way to get, at least with some committee chairmen, to get help and support. The Transportation Committee is a very bipartisan committee. The chairman of the committee, Bill Schuster's been here 3 or 4 times in the last year, working with me and John Larson on things. And as we were going into the committee hearing the markup of the bill, which is when you decide what's in and what's out, he'd accepted 4 of my 5 amendments. I guess 4 of 6, and I had 2 I still wanted in. And I said, Mr. Chairman, if you let my amendment in on pollinators on dairy, the pollinators is already in, I was still working on dairy, and I said, I promise I will not speak on the bill. Because we were looking at what we thought was going to be a 13-hour markup, and people were like, oh my, and he was going to have to stay the whole time. He was not excited about this. And so I walked in, I gave him a donut. We had these awesome donuts in the back. I put it on his desk like an offering. I said, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your help. And remember, if it goes in, I'm not saying anything. Nothing. I won't even thank you. Take any time. Looked around the room. It's like, okay, Esty brought me a donut. What are the rest of you bringing me to help get this in? 5.5 hours later, when we finished the bill, the donut was still sitting there. I said, Bill, didn't you like your donut? He's like, I'm trying to lose weight. This was like my incentive to get out of here before I ate. And I said, I hope you noticed I did not speak on the amendment. He said, duly noted and appreciated. Now, there aren't many people who are realizing what did he want. Among other things, he wanted a collegial markup, but he also did not want it going into the middle of the night while everyone talked about how awesome and wonderful they were and how great their amendments were. That's one of the things I've learned. If you want to be effective, you figure out what somebody else wants and how it overlaps with what you want and need for your district and for the country. And I think I've gotten really good at that. It's different strategies for different people. They're all different. But everyone wants to, every member of Congress is duly elected and has the same vote. I represent 750,000 people. They have diverse views and interests. So does the American public at this point. But there are a lot of things we could be getting done. And I've tried to pick those areas. STEM education, where the very conservative Lamar Smith much to Yale's great shame, a climate change denier, or at least those are the positions he's taking as chairman of the science committee. And I don't speak to him about those issues, and I don't talk in committee about them because it's not productive, and he's gone off the deep end on that issue. However, he and I together worked on a bill to support STEM education. And we got it passed last year and was signed by the president, and it's hanging on my wall. So we may not agree on everything, but there are things we can agree on. And if the U.S. Congress found ways to help with the American people to find those points of overlap, there's a lot more we could be getting done. And that's where I've chosen to spend my time and my efforts. And I think that reflects both what the country needs, but also, frankly, reflects my district, which is 43% voters not registered in either party. That is a really high number. My town of Cheshire is 50% unaffiliated voters. In our state, where you lose the right to pick candidates in a primary, and face it, for many communities, that is tantamount, in many elections, that is the election as the primary. So I'm acutely aware of how many people are so disgusted with both parties and so disgusted with the partisan bickering that they are giving up their opportunity to select candidates. And I do think about that every day. It's like they don't want, not the D or the R after my name, but frankly, an E for effectiveness. That's what I want to be earning right now, because American people are just really frustrated, and I'm worried about democracy. I am actually really worried about democracy right now.
Go into that a little more, because you said that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Clearly, as the fourth state here, we worry about democracy too, and that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean by that? And what are you seeing? What do you mean by that? You're worried about democracy, and what do you think should be done about it?
I'm worried about the increasing rancor. I'm worried about the delegitimization of elections and democracy that we're seeing right now, particularly by Donald Trump, who I think is an especially dangerous person. I don't think of him as a Republican. I think he is a narcissist, and I think he's deeply dangerous to this country. And he has used hateful rhetoric, and he has stoked the fires of hatred in ways that are shameful and wrong and dangerous, and will last after the election. No matter what happens, we're going to have to be dealing with this. A lot of the people who support Donald Trump are not, the vast majority, they're not terrible people, but there are people who are angry, upset, feel disrespected, don't feel that the country is working well for them, and have gotten distrustful of a political system that seems to favor the elites too much. And whatever one thinks, it's pretty clear that both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are elites. I mean, they are part of a system. They are those who have done well, right? There's no question that I have very strong opinion about Hillary being infinitely, vastly, not only more qualified, but more sound and prepared to lead this country of those choices. But Trump's delegitimization, his invitation to people effectively to arm themselves in Pennsylvania, and to go from places like Scranton to Philadelphia, where those people will be trying to cheat the election, that is a scary place. And that is something that I am very distressed that my opponent, for example, Clay Cope, has saw fit to denounce the unbelievably outrageous and offensive comments of Donald Trump from last week, but didn't denounce all this hate rhetoric challenging seeing Secret Service agents should drop their guns and see what happens to Hillary Clinton. This is the first time in U.S. history that the Secret Service has had to be logging threats by a major party candidate against his opponent. That is a really scary prospect. The Russians did hack the DNC and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and I had to change my cell phone number and I had to change my email because those were posted on the World Wide Web. That is a scary and dangerous thing when we have a major power that we are often not on the same page with, that is actually attempting to disrupt our election and undermine faith in the integrity of the electoral process. If you look at the polling, you will see that Republicans, by a strong majority, do not actually believe in the integrity of the political process right now. And that is deeply concerning. Despite studies that have been done nonpartisan, bipartisan studies that would tell you that, in fact, because we have such a disaggregated electoral system, that it's actually extremely hard to hack the U.S. system and influence the elections directly. It's very, very, very hard because it's, so you look at our state, you've got 169 cities and towns, they're not all linked. In fact, different precincts can't even talk to each other. I mean, it is so paper-bound still and so independently run that we're kind of off the other end. So that will actually help protect us right now. But I'm worried on cybersecurity threats. But the specter that has been raised, and what Donald Trump, and to a lesser extent what Bernie Sanders tapped into, is a fire. And I worry with my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, who think this is a creation of Donald Trump. It is not. That fire is already burning. He sprayed jet fuel on it, but the fire was already burning, and this country is going to have to address that issue. And we see it whether it's Black Lives Matter, of issues not being addressed, ongoing issues. I see it in Cheshire. There's differential stopping of people for stops on their cars. So not all the same people are getting stopped. There's unconscious bias that is present in our policing. There continue to be race issues in this country that we as a society have to continue to deal with, and pretending it's not so doesn't help us. We actually need to be honest and get to know each other better and actually work on being in community with each other. And in this election, I am terribly worried that people are disaggregating from community. I'm going to choose my news. I'm going to choose the way I think. Nobody I know thinks that way. Nobody I know is going to vote for whatever. If you get to that point, how do you sort of knit it back together to have the great diversity that this country has to offer, which I think is our greatest strength, is that diversity, and welcoming and supporting that. I have never before, in 11 years in elected office, received calls in my office from families who are worried about the safety of their children or themselves because of the way they dress, their presumed religion. That is a scary thing. No child who is wearing, attire affiliated with Muslims should be worried about going to school, should be getting bullied in schools. And I've gotten calls from families about that happening this year. And I hold Donald Trump responsible, and I hold Clay Cope responsible for not denouncing that. It's not just the sexist comments and the groping. It's a lot of comments and a lot of hateful talk that is wrong and dangerous. And I'm afraid we're going to have a lot of work to do. Whatever happens in the election, we're going to have a lot of, not just cleanup, but knitting back together of this country. And I'm not exactly sure how we do that. But we do it by modeling. I mean, part of it is by not using that tone. Part of it is by sitting down and saying, I need to listen to what you have to say. I have to hear what are you hearing?
But do you worry in terms of the democracy issue? Because I understand everything you're saying about the discord. But do you worry that people will stay out of the electorate?
Absolutely. I'm very worried about that. I'm worried you're going to have really low turnout. I'm worried you're going to have low turnout on both sides now, suppressed on both sides. And then everyone is in a position to say, I didn't elect these bozos. And it's become, I've heard this, I've been knocking on doors since 2004. I started in Allentown, Pennsylvania for John Kerry with my daughter, and that was eye-opening to hear what people had to say just going to every door. The talking points were all talking points that should have been for Kerry, and you walked away knowing every single one was going to vote for Bush. So it's not, people don't vote straight on issues. That much is very clear. People do vote a lot based on values. And Trump's appeal, and some of Sanders too, is people feeling disrespected. And that in part comes from, I'm going to set aside the PC discussions because I find those actually pretty offensive. But I will say people who have been working hard, who used to be able to feed their families, especially men who find they can't get work now that pays a kind of salary that allows them, that has them feel honored. Those jobs, too many of them have disappeared, and both sides, both parties have failed to address adequately the dramatic change in technological revolution. It wasn't just the recession. Look in the state. We lost probably 20,000 jobs in the financial services sector that are gone. They didn't go to a call center in India. Those jobs are gone because, kids the age of our sons who are, 20, 25, 26, 27, and they're writing code. And they're writing code that is limited to 10 actuaries' jobs. One 24-year-old is writing that code. Those jobs are gone. And I don't think we wrapped our heads around that. I'll tell you, when I was in the legislature in 2009, and we were getting briefings, bipartisan briefings, they were saying, wow, tough recession, maybe it will take to 2013 to get back to full employment in Connecticut. It's 2016, we're not there yet. So that was Joya and Sebas and all the state gurus on both sides of the aisle who've been looking at the state's economy for a long time. So I do think we all missed seeing that. I think we didn't contemplate just how rapidly technology has been changing things, and we need a different plan forward, and we need to first acknowledge that it's true, as we do with, say, Black Lives Matter. First, you have to actually take the scales from your eyes and take the blinders off and look what's actually going on, and listen to people who have different views from where you start. And then you start to figure out how do we move forward. I think that's going to take a different educational system. It's part of the reason I work so hard with technical high schools and community colleges. We've got to make sure that education is affordable for everyone, but it doesn't have to be, and probably not going to be, a traditional 4-year degree that costs $150,000 a year. That's not feasible, nor does it make sense as a society to say that that is the only way up. We have welding jobs right now for electric boat that you start at about $60,000 a year. You can get those jobs with a welding certificate that takes less than a year to get. And you aren't going to get a job right out the box. We have 16,000 open jobs in New England in advanced manufacturing. Those are jobs that start $50,000, $60,000 a year and go up over $100,000. We don't have enough skilled people to meet those jobs right now. One of the issues we don't, though, is we've got drug issues. We should talk about opioids. I mean, that's now become an issue for employers. It's an issue for them in lots of different positions that they can't hire. People can't pass the drug test. A lot of our industry is defense industry. They are prohibited from hiring anyone who's got issues on that. And so that's part of what I've been working on. Was also on opioid addiction, again, across the aisle, working on legislation. We got it passed. I was on the conference committee. We got additional money in the deal in September to help deal with it.
How much responsibility does the pharmaceutical industry bear in the opioid crisis?
Definitely bears some. And we see it right here in the state. This may be one that it worked too well. Certainly way too widely prescribed. And I know that because I know when my kids got their wisdom teeth out, and when I had carpal tunnel surgery done and a ganglion cyst removed, I was given 30 pills of Percocet, oxycodone, whatever. It turns out, for oral surgery, if you're getting wisdom teeth out, you actually should pretty much, inflammation is the issue. You actually shouldn't be getting painkillers. You get anti-inflammatories, and that will actually deal with the pain better than anything else. Not enough doctors and professionals have been sensitive enough to the risks. I think that part of the bill that I got included in the bill that was signed by the president was on prevention, was on education of medical professionals to have them understand the risks. But frankly, parents too, coaches. The way kids are driven hard in sports, they're getting repetitive injuries from overtraining and getting pressed to get right back on the field. I know families that they've had their high school kids get addicted because they were pushed really hard to get right back out there rather than recovering. So we all have some responsibility around this. We need to be looking at other ways of dealing with pain management. Frankly, some of it's unintended consequences. You look at, there was insensitivity to pain too often, frequently in surgery. The insurance industry, in part, now rates hospitals and docs based on patient satisfaction. Doctors and hospitals will tell you that they get bad grades if someone leaves the emergency room or leaves after surgery in pain. Well, they're going to give you a high rating. And they're worried that they're going to get bad ratings. They're not going to get reimbursements. They'll get dropped as being listed. I've spent a lot of time on this issue, so it's much more complicated than tends to get portrayed in sort of a cartoonish, the evil pharmaceutical companies addicting our children. There are a lot of other pieces that feed into it. we're going to need the pharmaceutical companies to actually make less addictive painkillers. That's something I want to see them pushing, to find ways to make them that they're not as addictive as they are now. And they ought to be doing research on that right now. Not just on Narcan and not just on Suboxone to get you off, but frankly, can we treat pain in different ways? Look at alternative pain medication. Look at plant substances and other things that may help us manage pain that don't carry as many risks as opioids do.
Do you see the likelihood of one of those ways that the state would fully legalize marijuana?
I think that I still have a lot of questions about that, I have to say. And frankly, Gary Johnson's performance, and I'm not kidding you.
No.
Gary Johnson's performance, his inability to remember things. I talked with a friend who used to be mayor of Baltimore, who used to be on panels with him, who said he was not like that 20 years ago. He was sharper, focused.
He uses marijuana?
Yes, that's one of his big appeals. He's a big legalized pot guy.
I didn't realize that he was...
Oh, yes, some of the millennial appeal of Gary Johnson is legalized pot, and it's the libertarian legalized pot and the sort of Snowden thing. Gary Johnson's popular in the district with millennials and others, I will tell you, in the 5th district.
So, given some of those things you said, what are you, should you win another term, what do you think will be the big focuses, specifically, in addition to some of the things you've mentioned?
Well, certainly continue to be jobs. You look at the unemployment rate, it's still high in parts of the district. Waterbury's 10.5%, Meriden Zone 11%, I think Torrington's up around 8%. So New Britain, near 10. So the major population centers other than Danbury in my district are still having challenges up through the Naugatuck Valley. It's part of the reason I've made manufacturing such a core part of my work, and I'm going to continue to do that. That area is growing. The supply chain that's going to develop with this commitment around both Pratt as well as at Sikorsky, that's going to be really important for the supply chain jobs in my district. So that most of the manufacturing in the 5th district is not the big factories, it's the people who supply components to the supply chain. So those are going to be really, and electric boat as well, all of those are important. I actually I've spent some time in Jackson Labs, Protein Sciences, should give a shout out just up the road here in Meriden. That was something that actually Rosa DeLauro and I worked with them to get the Department of Health and Human Services and BARDA, which is this rather obscure federal agency that deals with pandemic disease and flu, to get them to consider a smaller company for a major contract. It's something that I find a lot of the small innovative companies are barred from federal procurement rules because they're considered too small and therefore may not be able to deliver contracts. Well, if you want to incentivize American innovation, you've got to figure, the federal government should be at least allowing smaller innovative companies to get in the door and get the kind of support they need to develop the new products. Rosa and I were successful at least in getting them in front of BARDA and Health and Human Services, and they, on their own merits, just won a $600 million contract over the next 10 years. That's pretty significant, something to be proud of in the state. But it also illustrates that biotech and biomed needs to be one of the next pillars of what this state can be doing. There's a huge amount of interest, and it really is almost bioengineering. So it's in some ways marrying manufacturing and engineering with biology to cure disease, to repair bones, all kinds of unbelievable work. I think we're going to see 3D, additive manufacturing, basically 3D printed organs in our lifetime. I mean, the research that's going on right now is unbelievable. And a lot of it going on in the state. But that's going to take basic R&D investment, which I push for on the science committee, and it's going to take skilled workers. So we need to make sure every single one of our kids, girls or boys, whatever zip code, whatever their skin color, whatever their parents' education level, have STEM skills capable of filling these jobs that are the high-value jobs which this state should be looking to fill. America as a whole, but our state, we're a high-cost state. We need to be high-value at it. So we need to continue to focus on those pieces. I'm going to continue working on transportation. It's a big issue. I want to see actual high-speed rail, true high-speed rail through the Northeast. That's going to take major funding that will not come from the federal government. Might come from public-private partnership, franchise, something like that. We're going to have to be creative on infrastructure.
Which one of the options do you favor as far as the rail? I mean, it's like 4 or 5 different options.
I actually, having looked at the high-speed rail for a long time, you cannot keep it along the coast. There are too many rivers to cross, and the footprint's too small. You're going to have to go up and inland, 84 corridor and over. It's what actually makes sense in terms of taking it and then have I think, and then have drop downs to the shore. And there's a lot of opposition. Obviously, we've seen there's been tremendous opposition in the southeast part of the state about the proposals along the shore. But I think it would help Hartford. It would help Danbury, Waterbury, up through the northwest part of the state. Hartford up to Springfield and across, I think would allow you a lot faster than if you're trying to keep along the shore. I think that's more commuter, and personally, I think that makes more sense.
Does that include the spur that would go through stores and reconnect with the Northeast Corridor and Providence?
I think we should look at all those pieces, but I think the really fast stuff needs to go inland. It's not suitable. That's just my own view, and that's based on the engineering studies, and if you're going to get really fast. Plus, people like having multiple stops on the shore, and you can't get really fast if you're doing every 5 or 10 minutes stopping, because you actually have to get up to speed and stay at speed. It's the getting up to speed and slowing down that is the time in those fast trains. So you have to have some compromise on that. You have to recognize the major city to major city is different than your commuter rail. But that's something it would be transformative for the Northeast if we could do that. It'd be transformative.
Can you pop back to the STEM issue
Sure.
for a minute? Did you see that that there was a lot of concern raised about the Connecticut Board of Education and the technical schools this past week? And
I did. Now, I remember being in the legislature, and we successfully fought off. I talked with some of your reporters at that point when Jody Rowell was going to close, remember that? The technical high schools in 2009 in the budget crisis. And I was one of those people who fought hard against it, and I will continue to fight hard. And we should be expanding them. We have about the best technical high schools in the country. If anything, we should be going the other way. And I will tell you, looking at closing one on repairing of airplane engines, we've got Aer Lingus just moving in. We've got unprecedented 30 years of contracts to sell engines through Pratt. This is like the worst time in the world for us to be looking to cut that program.
A lot of folks.
It's crazy.
CBIA.
It's crazy.
Folks like that, business people, how much more the state needs to invest.
Absolutely. Because it's affordable. Part of it is, again, it goes back, college affordability, higher ed affordability, I hear about all the time. All the time. From students, from parents. So we need to find different educational models that includes, I think we're going to be looking over the next 20 years, something where people are going back and getting re-skilled. It might be every few years, might be after 5 years. It's what we need to be doing with the folks who've been displaced. Sort of the core of a lot of Trump support has been people whose jobs have been displaced. You know what? Rather than railing at them or blaming them, it's not, they didn't cause this technological revolution. But give you an example, if you look at like the folks in West Virginia, I think we would be smarter as a country, more empathetic and just smarter to say, listen, you and your daddy and your granddaddy, you powered America with coal. Now, we now understand that we want to save the planet for all of our children, so coal is just not the way we're going to go as a country. But there's no reason that you and your kids can't continue to power America. That's why we're going to figure out, we are going to build energy industry right here of, wind turbines and other things, and say, we don't leave on the battlefield, America doesn't leave our soldiers behind. In our country, we should not be leaving workers behind. We should not be leaving families behind. We'll figure it out. We will find a place for you. You want to work hard? We'll make sure you've got the skills, and we are going to invest in you, in your communities, to figure out the path forward. I don't know why we can't be not just saying that, but actually doing that, rather than having it be a partisan battle over, how did we get in this mess? It's like technology happened, which is generally a good thing. America's usually at the forefront of that, so rather than resisting that, shouldn't we be embracing that and then figure out how to help people make the transition? When people started driving cars, the people who make buggy whips and, and horseshoes, where a lot of them lost their jobs. But, most of us think it's a good thing that we had cars. So America's generally quite enthusiastic, in this state in particular, which was the first industrialized state. We should be finding ways forward, but it shouldn't be at the expense of people. And I think people feel disrespected and cast aside. And I think that is a lot of what we're hearing right now, is feeling like that. We judge people a lot by the value of too much of their worth is tied to their paycheck. That's a separate issue. But certainly, to have no one want your labor feels very disrespectful. Can you imagine how it feels like not only are you not getting paid, but like people are it feels like people are telling you, you aren't worth anything. You're trying to find a job. There's nothing for you because you have nothing worth offering. Nobody should be getting that message. Nobody should be getting that message. Whether you're a kid in Waterbury or whether you're in Torrington and you had a job for 30 years in a factory and the factory closed. Nobody should be getting that message in this country. And that's one of despair and then anger, and I think we need to turn that to one of rolling up our sleeves and figuring out something. We don't have all the answers, but we'll figure it out in a way that builds on our strengths. And that means getting the educational institutions to the table, figuring out what they can do. Can we do this differently? Can we give kids iPads so that whether your parents had high education level or not, if you've got internet everywhere and kids can have the best lectures at home, have Bill Nye the Science Guy teach you science, and then your teacher is doing hands-on stuff in the classroom, letting the teachers teach in the classroom, and not relying on whether parents are able to explain things at home, which just increases the educational divide, just makes it worse. So we've got to find ways of addressing that, not punishing the kids who don't start with the advantages other kids do. We believe in providing that support for all kids. Well, we're going to have to rethink some of how we do education if we're going to really make that meaningful. And certainly we're going to have to in the state, given, again, not on my plate, my former colleagues in the state legislature are going to have to figure that out on what we're going to do. And you've been writing about it a lot, I know, about how we're going to fund education in the state in a way that is fair to communities and honors that commitment to each and every child having an opportunity in this country. We're not doing a good enough job on that.
But you've got a district that has sort of
the whole range.
going against each other. You've got
I do.
towns like Cheshire that say, well, we deserve our share of the pie, but at the same time, you've got inner city districts, Waterbury, Danbury, to a lesser extent Torrington, that
certainly New Britain.
Right, New Britain, that feel like we need more than the suburban districts. How do you juggle that?
Well, I mean, again, I think that's why we have to look at how we're teaching, look at what resources we need to reach all the kids and support them. And I think we've got to engage teachers more constructively than some of what has been happening, which again, I think a lot of teachers have felt disrespected, I think, in this process. And we should be upping the skills of all kids, but recognizing it doesn't help us if we are disincentivizing the best teachers from going to the most challenging schools, and that if the kids aren't completely have made up all the disadvantages in a year, the teacher's doesn't mean the teacher hasn't been doing a great job. It's just going to take a while, and we should be measuring that progress over time. Again, these are mostly state issues at this point, but having gotten my start in politics by being a room mom in a classroom and seeing these issues, I know it from that perspective, and it's still, in a lot of ways, one of my most important issues, because I think it is how we demonstrate our commitment to this country. Public education is absolutely core to our belief in making that opportunity and that freedom real for every kid. So we got to keep pushing on that. Got to keep pushing on that. And again, I think technology can be helpful in that process. I really do. But we've got to start looking at year-round school and a lot of other, there's just a lot of things that we need to be looking at. Just in the same way, honestly, having the second Tuesday in November, which is a work day, be our election day based on an agrarian calendar, and have it not be on the Sabbath, and have it not be having a day when people have to work and they have to, a lot of people don't get the day off to vote. there are some things we could be doing better in this country and in the land of steady habits too. History is not always the most functional way to continue a tradition that maybe isn't serving the purpose that it once did. It was appropriate at the time, it no longer is. We need to be open-minded about that. Am I talking fast enough?
Did we miss anything? Is there anything else important that you'd like to share that we didn't ask you maybe?
Well, Luther raised that it is a very diverse district. I mean, that's actually one of the things I love about it. It is. It's got the Roxbury's with people with sculpture gardens of 100 acres. And it's got, New Britain, which is really challenged. But one of the reasons I'm so passionately running for re-election is there aren't enough congressional seats that are configured this way. That both requires and allows me to work with folks from all over the country, from both parties in many different regions, because there's parts of the district that looks like, Indiana, or Western Pennsylvania, Ohio. There are parts that are like ag communities in other parts of the Midwest. There are parts, little pockets that look like, high-tech in Silicon Valley or in Seattle. There are suburbs that look a lot like suburbs all over America. And I think I've really been able to help us work together on issues, getting things passed, seeing that it's okay, for conservative Texan to work with a Democrat from Connecticut, and we can get things done, and the country would be better for it. So looking beyond the presumption about people, so I find interesting conversations with a bunch of the Republicans who don't know me in the back of the room, like, wow, how come I never met you? I'm like, well, because I'm new and over here. Like, wow, you're so nice. One of them said, you're so nice, how come you're a Democrat?
Oh boy.
Which one to say, like, what you don't know is fearful to you, right? That's some of what we're seeing in the country, what people don't know, whether it's Muslims or African Americans, whether it's someone who's got a different educational level, their family came from a different country. We've got to work through those issues. And I've needed to do that and learned a huge amount about the people in this district and about the people of America by doing that. Sitting in 3-hour church services. My singing is not any better, my clapping is better. But it is being with people. There's not shouting at folks, not insisting that they come to where you are. But I think a lot about leadership is going to where people are. Going to where they are, stand next to them, stand in their shoes, and then together figure out how you walk forward. And that's what I've come to understand is how I think I can be most effective and most respectful and figuring, because I don't have all the answers. There's no way I'm going to have all the answers and can tell people everything we should do. But if I genuinely am making myself open and available, which I do, telephone town halls, Congress on your corners, meetings in my office, out and around in the community, all the time, everywhere, people will tell you what they think. And if you listen carefully, you can actually learn a lot and then get folks on board saying, like, well, what could we do better? You know this better than I do. And I think that has to be what we do to move forward. And I think I really have a record of doing that. And I've learned to do that and I'm committed to doing that. And I think that more than anything else perhaps is what's important in this election.
Over the weekend, one of our rival publications had an interview or a story regarding the 5th District race. And one of the reasons that Clay Cope said that he got into the race against you was that you didn't visit the small towns enough, that you hadn't been to Sherman and God knows what. How do you react to that?
I have been to all of the towns, all 41 of the cities and towns on multiple occasions. Clay Cope seems to be misguided by several things. First, he seems to believe that a press release, that I issue a press release or should issue a press release every time I'm in a given community. That's not the way I operate. A lot of times I'm, stop in, meet with people. I do a lot of work by phone. My job as a member of Congress has me in Washington about 40% of the time. So that is actually doing my job as well. It's not a travel log. This is not pins on a map of showing that you visited all the national parks or state parks. That's not what the job is. The job is working with people. And I will tell you, I and folks in my office have reached out by email and by phone to Clay as First Selectman of Sherman over the last, almost 4 years. Over 20 times, there was one single response, and it was thanks, with a notice about a FEMA grant or something like that. If he's that passive that he thinks like everyone should come to him, if I need to talk to the President of the United States, I call the White House. If I need to talk to the Senator, I pick up the phone and call. Or the governor. Or I'll go and meet with, as we did 2 weeks ago, meet with the folks from Sikorsky, meet with the folks from Pratt. I go to where they are. I don't wait for people to come to me. And that is a bizarre concept, frankly. And it's just ridiculous. Something to my schedule. That's absurd. I am out there all the time. And, that I'm not in Sherman every week going to First Selectman meetings doesn't mean I'm not doing my job. I am. I've been in local office and served in a town much bigger than Sherman on the town council, dealing with those issues on a scale 10 times the size of Sherman, as well as a state rep. So I think it's indicative that Clay actually doesn't understand the job and hasn't done his homework, which there's too much of that going around in this election, to say. Snappy sound bites without really saying honestly. He should talk to the First Selectmen, Republicans, and mayors who surround him, all of whom I work with because I pick up the phone and ask for help with things, and we're working on things together. And if he chooses not to do that, that's his choice. And so much the worse for Sherman, but that's their decision to make about him. It hasn't stopped Susan Chapman. It hasn't stopped Mark Bowden. It hasn't stopped Pat Lodra. It hasn't stopped lots of Republican leaders and Democrats who I work with. We're all elected. We're doing our job. So he shouldn't be so passive about that.
Anything else, anybody? No? Well, thank you very much, Representative Esty.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. And
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And it's my biggest concern is that people won't vote, to be perfectly honest. I am really, really worried about that. Small turnout elections can be very torqued results. That's my big concern. So that's what I'm doing now at doors. People, listen, I would love to have your vote and support, but honestly, think about the future of this country. People are fighting and dying. Americans are fighting and dying around the world to secure the right to vote for other countries. We owe it to them and to ourselves to show up and vote this year.
Yes.
Absolutely. So that would
Do you think the
be.
people who are not going to vote are more Trump people or more Hillary people?
I think they have been more Hillary people. I think now they may be Trump people. I think we may get suppressed on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to know. I think we don't know who's going to vote this election. I will say this, I never remember an election in my lifetime, 4 weeks as of tomorrow out, where I think it is possible either candidate could be elected president. I think it is possible the Senate could be Democratic or Republican. And I actually think it's possible either the House could be Democratic or Republican in 4 weeks after the election. That is that highly variable. I do. Because there's going to be more stuff coming out. You listen, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange is talking about dropping stuff. The Russians have hacked emails. We have no idea what's going to continue coming out. Anything is possible. And that's actually pretty terrifying. I have to say, that part, that it's that volatile, and particularly if you get a dramatically low turnout, because then you're having a really small, we've seen that. Certainly in municipal elections, you see that. Think about some of the races around here that have been special elections, special municipal elections where you have like 10% of the people vote. So you get the equivalent on a presidential, rather than these really high turnout elections. Imagine what happens if we get a 30% turnout for a presidential. God knows who those people are, right? Could be people who haven't voted in 20 years. Those ones are on fire. The hardcore Trump supporters are undeterred by any of this. Actually just gets them more worked up. So it's not Trump supporters, it's the neither of the above. The hardcore Trump supporters are just doubling down right now. None of this is making the slightest difference. I will tell you that for sure, because I talked to them. Not making any difference.
You don't think that you'll see a situation where they just don't vote on the presidential, but they do vote down ticket?
Maybe. That would be pretty unusual, though. It's usually the other way. I've definitely been at the polls, like talking to someone who's going in. I remember talking in 14 with a woman who's going in Waterbury, and she's like, I don't know who you are, I'm just going to go vote for Barack Obama. And I'm like, well, can we talk? I'm your congresswoman. Can we talk about, like, well, I don't really know. And it's like, well, okay, I'm here now. I mean, this is literally 7 o'clock at night on election, the night of the election. So I spent about 10 minutes talking to her, like, well, what are your issues? And, like, want to ask me some questions. It's a chance to know before you go in and vote. So it's pretty common. I think there were 3,000 or 4,000 in 2012 who voted top of the ticket and then didn't vote, which was like about the margin of victory I had in 2012. So it's a large drop-off usually from presidential, and then don't vote down ballot. So it's much harder to know if anybody actually will go in and not and blank the presidential, but still vote. People are talking about doing that. I think a lot. I'm concerned a bunch of those folks won't vote at all. I'm urging them, like, even if you can't make a decision or aren't willing to vote in the presidential, I understand and respect why people feel that way, but recognize there are other races that are really important where you probably do have strong, clear preferences, and it's important to vote on as many of those as you feel informed and knowledgeable about, and you still have opportunity to be informed and be knowledgeable about all the way up and down the ticket. So, but we've just never seen before that I recall people who turned in on a presidential didn't vote in the presidential and voted down ballot. We don't have any. It's one of the many things we have no precedent for in this election. Is that actually happening? Will people be motivated enough when if they're that disgusted about the presidential? Will they come in and vote anyway? I don't know. It's a serious concern. So that's a lot of what I worry about now. It's like, how do you get people who are really unhappy around that to vote anyway?